Hello and welcome to this week's episode of #Leadership What's on Your Mind. Remember, we're a podcast to make you stop and think about your leadership journey by speaking to amazing people with amazing stories and experts in their field. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit follow on your podcast provider and you subscribe to the YouTube channel. And every Wednesday at 6 a.m, we'll have another episode coming your way. So this week, I'm super excited to be speaking to Kitty. How are we doing?
Very well, thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited about this. I've met Kitty through the Institute of Directors, and she'll introduce herself a little bit more in a second. But it really fits into the category of my want and need to get a real diverse conversation about leadership. So no pressure, but I know it's going to be an amazing conversation. So Kitty, for the people who don't know who you are, I'm going to hit the 20-minute timer. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks. So my name's Kitty Ussher. I'm the Chief Economist at the Institute of Directors, which is a membership organisation for company directors, often smaller companies all over the UK. I'm an economist by background, but I also had a career in politics, and I was an MP for Burnley in East Lancashire in the 2005 to 10 Parliament and a junior minister in Gordon Brown's government.
Amazing. That is an impressive CV there, isn't it? So we're going to have lots to talk about here. So as we start every episode with guests, we talk about two questions. So one, we'll start. So #leadership, what's on your mind? And what comes to your mind when you hear the word leadership?
I think for me, it's having a really clear sense of what good looks like. You know, what does it feel like when you're doing it right? And having that picture so fixed in your mind that you're able to diffuse it to everybody that's around you, so that almost automatically we are all going there because we know what it feels like when we're doing it brilliantly. That's what leadership feels like to me. Amazing.
I like the way you said and said good as well. In my journey of talking to people, we always sometimes get tripped up with looking for perfect, and even using the word perfect. And it really gets people more aligned when you talk about what does good look like. It creates a different mentality and a different focus. So I love that. Thank you so much. Staying with you, where do you think your leadership journey started? So how far, was there a light bulb moment at the time? Or are we going back a long way and it's on reflection that you know that's where your leadership journey started?
I don't know if I'm allowed two answers to that question.
Go for it. Let's do two.
Because leadership means so much in different contexts, as you said, and I think you're totally right to sort of take a diverse view of leadership. I think in my experience of leading people, there was a light bulb moment that I was quite conscious of. When I realised that in your team, it's so important to know what it is that people really enjoy doing about their job and what it is that they find difficult in their job. And often just simply asking that question in a low stakes way helps everything in terms of putting the team together. Because if you know what someone really likes doing, then why not give them more of it? And if you know what they actually find a bit of the chore, but they feel politely they need to do in their job, then why not find someone who really likes doing it, that bit, and take it off them? Both sides will be really pleased. And so just asking that question and understanding the answer to that question, I remember helped me in a very particular sort of difficulty that, well, not difficulty, but maybe challenge that I had with a team member. And I suddenly realized that's what you should always know when you're managing people. The other answer to the question, though, is more a different type of leadership. A lot of what I do in my career is actually what the private sector calls thought leadership. So it's about ideas and putting things together. And there was a moment quite early in my career when I found myself commissioning research, independent research, from an outside organisation that had total freedom, but the way that the question was framed meant that it helped us to make the argument that we were trying to make in the press. And there was a sort of moment afterwards, and I looked back then and thought, I can do that. I've got the type of brain that works out how to turn something quite technical into a sort of broader strategic objective. And I think actually in many ways I've been doing that ever since. So there was a moment when I realised that was where I was going to flourish.
Amazing. Where do you think that skill set came from? Did that come from an earlier experience and foundation have you been able to have that skill set, as you said?
I don't think there was ever a sort of moment where I was kind of consciously taught it. So there was something about the wiring of my brain that when I was put into that environment, it just began to flourish, and I found it incredibly intellectually stimulating. And then as the years went on, I did more and more and became more experienced. And so therefore it sort of became part of my USP, I suppose.
Yeah. Amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's really interesting.
You need to know what your USP is, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. It helps, doesn't it? Knowing how you deliver leadership and work well. So could you step us through your journey of your career? Because I know that it's got a lot of sort of subtle links to leadership. But yeah, we were chatting just before we came on about some of the things that you've been involved with at a young age as well. So could you give us a little bit of a story about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in awe of people who have a kind of linear career, who seem to have become, more and more senior and important as life goes on. I'm very conscious that mine, or at least to an outside observer, may not look like that, in that my most sort of high status moment in my career actually came when I was in my 30s. I was an MP and a junior minister, including a time at the Treasury at the beginning of the banking crisis, which all sounds, to an outside observer, impressive, I suppose. But for me personally, actually, I wasn't seeking status. That first half of my career was more a very strong sense of vocation. So, I mean, it could have been anything, but, nobody was going to stop me doing that, because I kind of had to do it. It was like, I don't know, a horse to water or a magnet. Ever since I've been a teenager, I just couldn't not move in that direction. It was always there, a very strong sense of purpose, I guess. And so I didn't have the sort of self-doubt, because it was just felt kind of natural. And I suppose I was lucky to have had the opportunity to fulfill that sense of vocation. Since then, I've done all sorts of stuff in the private sector, and it's been more sort of immediate. It's been more, that sounds interesting, or I can do that, or, I'll feel intellectually stretched if I pursue this particular path, or even sometimes that's a nice team, or I can help you because I know how to do that thing that you're asking me to do. So I guess it's been I'm not sure, I don't want to say halves, because I don't want to be over yet, but in two parts. There was a sort of discontinuity as I shifted from one to the next.
Yeah. So this is interesting regards to being in the public and the private sector. From regards to your own experience of leading and being people focused and all the things that we talk about in the leadership bubble, if you like, was there any similarities or any differences or any things that stood out as challenges, or what, were there any sort of reflections of similarities or differences?
Actually, you know what? I think they're incredibly similar. I was expecting differences, but we're all people at the end of the day, and mission-orientated organisations succeed regardless of their ownership structures. And I know you've got a armed forces background, and sometimes when people ask policy questions, around ownership, should hospitals be privately owned or publicly owned, or other things to do with how public services are structured, I often use an army analogy and say ultimately it's the quality of the leadership and the mission of the team that drives the outcome, not so much fundamentally who owns the shares at the end of the day. So I thought it would be harder, but actually it's not. I found I had transferable lessons moving from one to the next. Amazing.
Awesome. So obviously a lot of the things, and this is going to be quite funny because obviously the economy is your expertise, and I didn't really want to talk much about the economy, which you might be quite pleased about, I don't know, trying to take you away from your comfort zone. But obviously a lot of the stuff that you do involves a lot of the skills that we share, upskill, all that communication, feedback, healthy conflict, if you like, delivering tough messages, what sort of things, obviously our audience is wanting to level up their leadership journey by upskilling and learning from people that have been there and done it. What sort of things can you sort of share that have been the learnings or been any of your successes that have come to light in the roles and the positions that you've been in? That's a bit of quite a long question there, by the way.
As I said, I think knowing what good feels like is something that I find a very positive way of thinking about it, because it's about celebrating when things go well and seeing if we can normalize that. In terms of looking at the economy, it's a really interesting role, because on the one hand, you're quite technical. I mean, I was up early this morning going through Office of National Statistics data that had been released at 7 a.m. in order to affect the markets around unemployment and the state of the labour market, which is hugely interesting at the moment. And my aim in that 15 minutes was to take data and to turn it into a message that could be understood by, I mean, definitely by someone who could read the FT, but preferably, all media outlets and our own channels. And it worked this time. Sometimes it doesn't work. And so I guess what you're doing, and it's very satisfying, in a very short-term way, to then, by the time you got into the office, you're on page 2 of the FT or whatever online. But I guess there's a leadership in there, because you have to draw your wider experience of what your audience is interested in and sort of what matters, and take something that is fundamentally technocratic, it's a line of data, and be able to sort of instantly interpret it and use it to guide how people are feeling. I'm not sure that's a lesson. Maybe by this stage it's trusting your instinct. If something you think is relevant and important and time is short, then have confidence in yourself that to just say it like you see it, because the fact that you're seeing it is interesting enough in itself, because you're the one who's been put in the position to do the translation job.
Yeah, amazing. And I think that leads me on to a couple of other questions, funnily enough. But we mentioned something about the imposter syndrome label. I'm not a massive fan of calling it imposter syndrome, but we sort of said that in my personal journey, if I feel like I'm winging it or feel like I'm not in the right room, I'm 100% in the right room, because I wouldn't be pushing hard enough if I wasn't. And I've only learned that over time. Like, you imagine I share about coming out of the military bubble. That happened quite a lot early on, even going into the platforms like LinkedIn, for example. But what's been your experience, and how do you talk about that subject here? Because I know it's affected you in different ways, or observation side.
Well, I quite like the fact that imposter syndrome has become a thing. It's a phrase we now understand that perhaps we didn't 10 years ago. Because I'm not sure I was using it 10 years ago. Maybe that says more about me. I think we should just talk about it. Yeah. I've got imposter syndrome. Then everyone go, oh, don't be ridiculous. You're paid to do this job. You wouldn't be doing it if, we didn't think you could do it.
Yes.
But I do know what it feels like. I mean, I think I've got a very clear memory of actually realizing that I didn't think my ministerial office was mine, even though I was going into it every morning. It felt like I was just sort of temporarily there. Clearly there'd been some kind of error, and I was sort of doing things like not leaving possessions there, because obviously it wasn't really my room. And as soon as I became conscious of this, I thought, you stupid person, the Prime Minister rang you up and said, I want you to do this job. How could it not be my office? But I think I sort of, or maybe it's just too good to be true, because it was a dream job in many ways, and so I thought someone was going to wave a magic wand and I'd wake up and it wasn't true anymore. I mean, of course, all ministers only ever last a few years in post, and I was an exception to that, but I could have at least admitted that I have my name on the door.
Yeah.
So
I love that, because that's one that I shared with you, didn't I, before we came on, of when I was sat in the dining event I met you at originally, and we mentioned as well that everybody's just people. Like, we're all people. And I heard you talk. You spoke really well about the economy. Delivered it to Northwest businesses, and I just thought that what an amazing story, an amazing career, and you're a lovely person that speaks really well, and people out there think that they might be restricted by self-limiting beliefs that they can't get into a management and a leadership role, for example. And everybody at every position has these thoughts and barriers and self-doubts, don't they? And it's really interesting to hear other people talk about it.
But of course, when I looked at you around the table, you know, I'd been invited to sort of lead a conversation, but the local regional organisation through various networks had convened the group of people around the room. And I wasn't going to look at you and go, everyone else is here for valid reasons, apart from Stuart. You know, you were perfectly valid around the table and had a lot to contribute. And thank you for your kind words as well. So I think it's just about, you know, talking about it. I took a 2-year sabbatical a few years ago, and I did one of these teaching in the classroom things through a wonderful organisation called Now Teach it's a sort of teach first for middle-aged people, old people. And so you get put in a inner city classroom and taught how to teach. And I remember the moment where I'd managed to get them all silently to be doing some kind of, you know, low stakes test or something. And they were all doing it. And I was walking around the room with my sort of teacher walk. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm actually doing it. But of course, to them, I'd been a teacher for months, because as far as they were concerned, I was standing in front of the class and looked like a grown-up. But it was only at that moment that I sort of felt I was actually doing it.
Awesome.
So I think just be self-conscious of it. Once you can pick yourself up and then have a laugh at yourself and think, yeah, of course I'm.
So that's I love that story, by the way. That's amazing. And what led you to have that time out and to do something different like that? Because that links to a lot of things that some people have said on the podcast, but not many, about doing something creative and different, or whether it be step outside your comfort zone or a complete sort of reset, if you like. What was it for you?
It was completely that I needed a reset. So I had had this very high-flying political career, which I decided myself to step away from in 2010 for family reasons. It wasn't really working at home. Very difficult decision. And I had just sort of settled into a period of consultancy, doing amazing, you know, very high intellectual kind of projects. But I think deep down in my soul, I was still sort of unwinding from the more public facing part of my career. And it's hard to describe, but I sort of felt I was on a trajectory of recovering from that. So I sort of needed to go back to ground zero, do something totally different, reset myself so that I could then face the future more. And I'm incredibly, one of the things I'm most proud of in my career is actually that 2 years of doing that sabbatical, because I thought it took a lot of bravery to step away and do something different, but I knew that I needed to in order to regenerate. And all the opportunity, you know, I came back, in fact it was only sort of 2 or 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I came back from that, maybe 3 years ago since I decided to come back. And I've had so many opportunities. I'm loving my job. I'm also on 2 boards in the financial services sector as non-executives. And I don't think my head would have been in the right place to sort of allow those opportunities to come my way if I hadn't done that reset. And I also learned an enormous amount from it and had a huge amount of fun and found it really, really hard. Which I needed to do. So it felt a bit like if you need to go and run a marathon. I just really wanted to push myself and do something different.
Amazing. I like that. A great mentality, and that shows a lot of whether it was a build up or a sudden moment. It's a lot of self-awareness that you need to do that as well. We've got a couple of minutes left. This time flies by. I wanted to just whether we can pass on some experience or thoughts, and I want to really go into the sort of healthy conflict or delivering tough messages. Obviously in your role you have done that over the time in probably several of your positions of being able to deliver uncomfortable messages or have we've talked on the podcast about that conflict, like with society puts a negative spin on conflict, but in a team dynamic leadership business sense, we want healthy and encourage healthy conflict and discussion. What sort of things have been your wins on having that conflict in teams that is a positive or delivering uncomfortable messages?
I think it's easier when there's a shared sense of what the organisation needs, which then comes back to the point about what does good look like and what's vision, and where are we trying to get to. And then, I mean, if you're needing, for example, to let someone go or tell them something that they're not welcoming, that they don't welcome, if they truly believe that you're being an uber professional and acting for the organisation that we've all signed up to, and they can sort of see it almost in a technical way that it is the right answer, then it does make it easier. I also think you need to be able to put several hats on. I do quite a lot of public speaking in my current role, but I did even more as a sort of constituency member of parliament. And I remember one moment about to go into a public meeting that I knew was going to be extraordinarily fraught, and just having that kind of complete sort of fear, I guess, or just in the car with one of my team members outside in the car park, and suddenly I was just able to sort of just like straighten up, put the hat on, like where's the gummage, and go and do it and stand up straight. And she just looked at me, how did you do that? And I was like, you just have to get in the zone. And I think often it's the same for delivering unwelcome news as well. You have to just absolutely be it. And have it absolutely just simply part of the job. Awesome. And your team needs to feel that you care for them personally. I think that's maybe another lesson to pass on. Absolutely focused on the outcome, but really caring about them, almost like a family. We have to be safe. We mustn't do that. We have to lock up at night. That's we don't discuss that. However, I'm interested in you as the full person as well.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much. That's our 20 minutes. That's gone flown by. And thank you so much. So guys, if you've enjoyed that, make sure you let us know which elements have hit home for you more than others. Everybody's different from each of the episodes that goes out, and I love hearing your feedback. If you haven't already, make sure you hit follow on your podcast provider and follow us on the YouTube channel if you're watching us. And pass forwards. We've got an amazing array of guests coming out every Wednesday at 6 a.m. this year. And the diversity on the conversation around leadership is really exciting for me to bring to you guys as well. So Kitty, thank you so much.
Thank you. Real pleasure. Lots of interesting food for thought.
Yeah, fantastic. And all your links are going to be below for guys to, ladies and gents, to reach out and see what you're up to and stuff. So, guys, thank you so much. And I'll see you all next week. Take care. Bye.